Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Heal and Shift, hosted by me, Sunita Passi. And for those of you who may be new to this podcast is, on this podcast, every time I interview a person, these people are all people who are active in the world creating changes, whether they're working with individuals or communities, or they could be working with methods that are actually rooted in business. They're old and new approaches to spirituality, to well-being and healing in all its myriad forms. And what they share is a desire to work for the good of people and the planet in ways that actually genuinely seed change. In the course of their journeys, they've experienced insights that make them more of the people that we can all be at our best. These are conversations I love to have, regardless of who is listening. And I'm always grateful to all of you wonderful people who are on the same wavelength and join in to listen to the podcast. So let's tune in together today. Today, we meet the lovely Darren Eden. Hi, Darren.
Hello, Sunita. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. Now, Darren is, I actually came across Darren's work 7 or 8 years ago when I lived in London. And Darren, interesting chap. Darren's work is really all about melding sort of spirituality with physicality, I would say. It's kind of like all the realms in between. And Darren actually, he even says, if you have a look at his website, he even says that he assumed the secret to life lay somewhere between the realms of success and spirituality. So that gives you a little bit of an inkling into the kind of journey Darren's been on. In the early part of his career, he was in the IT industry and very successfully as a change management consultant. And then as he evolved, developed intuition, started to explore other things. You moved more into the realms of mastering intuitive wisdom. And since 2000, this has been really Darren's expertise. He's developed a huge platform, training others in this. He's worked with extraordinary people from all over the world, which we're going to hear more about as well. And all of them, to enhance their intuitive wisdom, but also to help people live their greatness. So really teach people how to, I sort of think about it in the sense of teach people how to heal and then how to rise and really be the best version of themselves. So very excited about this interview. When I was sort of thinking back to when I first came across your work, it was kind of a bit of a crossroads for me. And I think I was going through some changes. I was sort of waking up from a bit of a deep sleep, you might say, and your work was introduced to me. And I actually came to one of your amazing events. At that time, you were hosting huge events in London. And, I remember that workshop when we all really physically danced to shape the energy, in our bodies, in that workshop as well. So in Mythic terms, Darren, how would you describe now for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a great question. Let's just ask the big question because it's a great word, mythic terms, because not many people are used to that word. What does it mean to live according to a myth or a mythology, And it's a good question, particularly in light of what we're experiencing now, because when you ask the question now, I think that the now is the global pandemic. That's the thing it's influencing all of humanity. And myths are about the stories that we make up and the world that we make up with our imagination. And, I think that the closest thing that what we're experiencing now as a race is similar to, I think is very similar to during the Renaissance when they had the plague and the Black Death. And, it had a huge impact on the population of the planet. But it was also a time when so much change was happening, and it's the same with us, and where people were focusing on things beyond the norm, beyond the structures of Catholicism or Christianity even. They were thinking about myth then, they were thinking about philosophy, they were thinking about ancient spirituality and art and music, and so much happened and changed. And I really believe that that's the opportunity for us now as well, because like you were saying before, like so many people are going through changes, and a massive change like this, I think, is a catalyst for people to really to wake up and to discover who they really are and discover what they love, you know.
Yeah, and discover what they love. Yeah, and I mean, I think many of us are seeing it in our own conversations, our own day-to-day conversations. You know, friends are saying to me, you know, I feel like I'm conversing in a different way, and you know, that we're not, you know, maybe there's a change in the way that we even judge the external world, and you know, everything that we've known to be the norm, as it were, you know, and also owning, owning all of these aspects of who we are as well. So I love this word, because I would when I sort of teach and talk, I would, you know, be referring to much of these concepts in the sense of a spiritual awakening, and you know, the awakening stages. And I love this correlation to sort of the myths. So what were the earliest hints of your own mythic path, Darren?
Wow. That's a great question. Again, for me, living within a mythical context is also kind of living in a spiritual context as well. And it happened I was very young, actually. And when I was really young, I was a very devout Catholic. And I was really into the mysticism of Catholicism and Christianity. And I was really into the mysticism of the Mass as well. And so that was kind of like my beginning, my pathway. And what was really interesting for me, and I think what launched me on my own hero's journey, my own mythic personal path, was when my stepfather died when I was a teenager. And we didn't have a very good relationship, that's polite. But it was my first experience of death. And it really made me question life and death, and made me question the teachings of the church. And that's when I started exploring all these other religions and forms of spirituality. And it really happened in my mid-teens. And I was kind of on that searching quest, I would say, until my mid-30s, when I'd come across intuition and the hero's journey at the same time. And that's when I just went, you know, and because what both of them did was allow me to start searching within myself and finding that love and wisdom within myself, as opposed to looking outside of myself. So I think
yeah, and that's early, you know, because for you know, I mean, you know, this happens at any time in your life, for sure. You know, for me, it happened, you know, I started to sort of step up into this space, you know, sort of around about 29, 30, I remember shifts taking place. And so, you know, you were this little young lad, and, you know, going through this, you know, deeply challenging experience. And so your perception then starts to completely shift about, you know, your reality, I guess. And like you say, then you dig deep, because you're seeking for answers and meaning. And so you know, did you have, through that period, were there any sort of transcendent experiences, or did you have anything that you know, connected you, you know, more so to some of the concepts that maybe you were stumbling across and, you know, reading about?
Yeah, absolutely. I have many, actually. But funnily enough, one that really stood out for me, that just sealed everything, because I just spent a year kind of diving in and training in the premises that allow us to purposely access intuition, and started to apply them and all the phases of the hero's journey. Because once I'd learned that, it was a revelation to me. It really was like a treasure map suddenly was given to me. And then that was back in 1998. And then I was and still am a massive movie buff. And I went to see this film, The Matrix, in Sydney, where I was living at the time. You know, I'm sure you've heard of it. And I'm watching this movie, and every single phase of the hero's journey is in that one film. And I'm watching this while in Sydney, where it was filmed, and you go out after the film is finished, and I'm surrounded by the Matrix. You know? And I was in a suit. I was working for a respectable software company. I had exactly the same phone, and it just made me realize this is real. And it really propelled me on this path to bring it to life and to discover and master what all this is about. And I really dived into, as a result, the teachings of Joseph Campbell, who kind of articulated the whole concept of the hero's journey. And yeah, I think that was a definitive moment for me.
Yeah, that's pretty huge, really, because actually I'm just having a look, you know, it's, you know, just sort of thinking about, you know, again, at your young age, you know, how that would have felt, especially when you're in quite, you know, in a corporate environment. You know, it's this is the yin and the yang, isn't it? It's and fascinating to see that unfold. So for those that may be listening who aren't familiar with the hero's journey, could you just give, in a nutshell, how would you describe it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, there are phases that the hero's journey just articulates specific phases that we can go through, or stepping stones that enable us to progressively transform into our greatness. It's like a pathway to enlightenment. Really, it's the pathway that anyone who has transformed has gone on. And the way it works, in summary, is where it's all built on myth. It's also called the hero myth, and it's all built on looking at life symbolically rather than literally. And the hero's journey starts with the hero or the heroine is born of royalty, which is symbolic of our divinity. And then there's a threat to life where the hero or the heroine is wounded, and then they go into hiding. And I often refer to Harry Potter as an example of that, where he's the son of a witch and a wizard, so he's born of royalty in that world. There's a threat to life, and Voldemort tries to kill him, and he's wounded, he's got the scar on his forehead, and he goes into hiding, living as a muggle. And then when we go into hiding, we forget who we really are. And we've all gone on that path because we've all been wounded. We've all formed these beliefs that then shape and mold our identity. And then we live as this pretend self in a pretend world. But then there comes a time when we go, there's got to be more to life than this, because while we're in this pretend world, we're struggling and we're surviving, and life is tough. But then there's a point where you go, there's got to be more to life than this, when the hero or the heroine goes on their call to adventure. And they step back into the real world of love and magic, and they experience magic and synchronicity, and they get a glimpse of their hearts. And that's a wonderful time, you know, wonderful time. And that's, I think, when you're saying, when did you get that mythic hint? It's very much in that context of the call to adventure. And then what happens is that you then face or encounter threshold guardians who trigger your doubts and fears, and if you don't have the courage and conviction to continue, you refuse the call and get plugged back into your pretend world. But what their true purpose is to galvanize that courage and conviction that's within you, so that you can cross the threshold into the magical world. And whenever the hero or heroine does that, they always meet a wise person who reveals to them who they really are. You know, you're not a muggle, you're a wizard, you know, you're not a software programmer, you're the one. They always reveal who they really are. And then they invite the hero or the heroine to go into training with them. And then they train to master their inherent abilities, whether it's magic or intuition or imagination. But those inherent abilities that have been dormant to this point, like Harry going to Hogwarts, he gets trained in that. And then as a result of being trained, you then face your demons. And as a result of facing your demons, you die. And then you resurrect. And then you resurrect into who you really are. And that's when you live your royalty. And that's a really powerful, that's where all the transformation happens, at the death and resurrection phase, which is all facilitated by that foundational training.
Wow. Wow. It's amazing.
Of the hero's journey for you.
It's amazing. Now, you know, over 7 billion of us living on the planet. So, you know, I'd be interested to know, you know, just how many of us do you think really rise up? That's the first question. And also, you know, if we dip our toe into this, we take ourselves out of this matrix. And look, let's be honest, you know, there's so many layers to that matrix. It's if you've spent 30, 40, 50 years, you know, being absorbed by, you know, various messages and ways of living and thinking and eating and, you know, all of these all these kind of controllers, there's a lot of layers to peel off. So also you can hit resistance. So a percentage, you know, because, and then also what's your advice when you're hitting resistance?
Yeah, very good. Well, to be honest, the percentage is very low out of the whole human population, because we really convince ourselves that we are our identity. We convince ourselves that we are this pretend self. And not only do we do that, we then create relationships and we create structures individually and collectively that reinforce that within ourselves. And so that's why very few people overall, because we live out of reaction, and these beliefs that we formed create our thoughts and feelings. So it's all self-perpetuating. But there are people who do cross the threshold into the magical world. That's the equivalent to a spiritual awakening, where they experience their heart, and it's real and it's fundamental. And that's where you do encounter obstacles, and the obstacles are when you encounter threshold guardians. So they can be external people or yourself. And that's where external people can go, what are you doing? You know, get back in your box. You know, helpful friends and family, as Campbell likes to call them. Or that could be our own doubts and fears.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a reflection of our own nature, you know, an aspect that I think sometimes we've disowned as well. And it becomes that mirror reflect. I think it's very easy to say, oh, you know, friends and family aren't supportive of this, or, you know, it can be a variety of things, can't it? But, you know, with the spirit, you know, with the spiritual path and walking the spiritual path, you know, one of the stages is doing really deep inner work, like really going in and, you know, really healing from really core, you know, these core wounds. Is that something you recommend when you take somebody through your programs?
My approach is slightly different. I believe in doing deep inner work, but I don't believe in healing wounds, because the premise that I work with is that your royalty created your wound in order to create your beliefs, in order to create your identity. I actually work with that. There's one wound and it's actually divine. It's actually part of who we are. But because it hurts so much, we think that we have to do something about it, because we formed it in relationship to our parents. We're looking for 100% love from our mother, 100% orientation from our father of our royalty, and we didn't get that, and it really hurts. And so because of that, we think we've got to do something to heal ourselves, but we don't. All we have to do is learn how to access our intuition, which is part of our royalty. And to me, that's the deepest inner work that you can do, is to access the inner wisdom. And then that gets you across the threshold to reveal who you really are. Because that's the only way we can really see our royalty and our greatness, is to have it revealed to us with our intuition. And then just go on the path to transform into that. And then your identity sorts itself out, because it's an extension of your greatness. And then they become one again. Which again, why the Matrix was so good as an example, because, you know, Thomas Anderson had problems, but he didn't have to go to a therapist.
No.
He stepped out of the Matrix, got trained into who he really is with a wise person, with Morpheus, transformed into the one, and discovered he had all these magical powers that he could wield both in that world and also in the Matrix, you see.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, as a practitioner, you know, there are so many modalities, you know, that keep us sitting in therapy, you know, for years and years and years and years. And again, it's another matrix, you know, it's another label, it's another conditioning, it's another disconnection from nature. It's, you know, it's another, you know, it's again, I think so I totally, you know, I totally relate to what you're saying. But, you know, as through this process, there's still going to be a level of integration. There's still going to be a level of shift taking place, which is all a bit funky and a bit messy, I imagine. So, you know, so what are the simplest things you'd recommend to help people, A, connect with their intuition, and then to help them through this process?
Yeah, it's a great question. Basically, there are just some fundamental principles or premises that we have to embody. And I basically have kind of distilled it down to these 6 premises that if you start to learn and get educated in each of these premises and principles, they progressively serve you to start being able to purposely access your intuitive wisdom and to be able to consistently make that shift from seeing yourself as your identity, as the muggle that you are, to the wizard or the magician that you really are. And so it's kind of like a formula in a way, but it's not so much a formula or a method, but it's more a series of these premises. Like, for instance, the first thing I always get people to do is to acknowledge their thoughts and feelings, because it works on the assumption or the premise that those thoughts and feelings come from beliefs, and whatever you're reacting to your thoughts and feelings, those beliefs are running the show. And whereas if you can acknowledge them, then you're free to shift your focus. And then we shift our focus to what I call going into innocence, which allows you to be in the mystery, to be in the unknown, to be in awe and wonder. And then from there, it connects you to what I call your focused imagination. And it's with your focused imagination as part of your greatness. That's a big part of our magic. You know, it's like everyone gets, at the beginning of their hero's journey, gets what I call a magic talisman, and which you get to wield. And our focused imagination is that magic talisman. And it's amazing what we can wield with it. And the first thing that it gives us access to is our energetic body and our sovereignty, because that's where our imagination and intuition lives. And once we've embodied our sovereignty, then we connect to the vision of what we would love with our focused imagination, whether that be our own royalty or something that our hearts would love to create. And then intuition communicates symbolically. And then what we do is we receive symbols and metaphors from our intuition, which kind of taps into the collective unconscious or the subconscious mind, you know, like Jung talked about the collective unconscious. And then amazingly, the symbolism comes through, and then you extract the gold from the symbolism, and it has such a ring of truth and what I call a ring of love to it. And so it's the embodiment of each of those premises and the mastery of each of those premises that make all the difference.
I remember that workshop in London, and I've attended a few of yours, and I've had sessions from you, so I should just say that. But this, I do remember actually now that, you know, it was a huge group of people, and you were working very specifically on one individual who had been in the army, and really helping him get in tune with his intuition to better guide him and be his guardian. And I was blown away. I remember that actually, you know, the sort of that deep dive work that you did. He then saw a key, and actually he deep inside him, he wanted to create kind of a film. You know, he wanted to share some work around obviously the experiences he's been having since he's been in the forces. And yeah, we were all blown away. It was like, it was phenomenal, you know. And so it's very, very deep energy work. And you know, and what I saw from that was that actually when you cleanse the mind, you know, you bring your thoughts and feelings into alignment with the wisdom of your soul, those messages, they're all there, you know. But probably every day we've got conflicting thoughts and feelings, and you know, it becomes more difficult to actually tap into this kind of guiding light. So yeah, the symbolism, wow, yeah, the symbolism's really, really quite something. So there have there been times when you've ignored your intuition, Darren, and what was the consequence?
Next question. Question. Yes. Yeah, it's kind of it's an amazing way of living intuitively. Highlighted by the fact that when you don't, you see the reality that you've created. You know, I think there are massive consequences of when I haven't, especially having been trained. I mean, the first one was both of them, funnily enough, relationship based events where what my intuition had already revealed was my soulmate, who I called my forest beauty, like kind of in the symbolism that presented itself. Oh, she's my forest beauty. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to create her. But then what happened is this beautiful blonde woman came into my life. and I went, oh, my forest beauty can wait. I'm going to have a relationship with this beautiful blonde woman. To my peril, honestly, it was like played out all my relationship dysfunctions. It kind of where my forest beauty seemed like this elusive person over here. Oh no, she can wait. She's just something, a figment of my imagination. It's this gorgeous woman, you know, right here. Honestly, it was talk about catabasis.
Lots of angst by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Well, the thing was that I really learned that because I saw my whole pattern play out from my wound and my beliefs. But after that, it did actually give me that conviction to go, that's it. From now on, I'm not going to have any other relationship other than my forest beauty. And then amazingly, within a very short period of time, magically created her. And we've been together for over 20 years now. Yeah.
And then those who are the skeptics, you know, the skeptics out there, you know, might just say, well, you were living your life and you were doing what you enjoy, and that, you know, puts you in, you know, but there is, you know, science is catching up now as well, and you know, and sharing concepts and ideas around ultimately energy, you know, and energy fields, and how and as you talk, you know, the intuition and the guidance that we receive at a very deep level, and that's ultimately what you're talking about, is that you were following, you know, that guidance at that level. So whenever you want the answer to anything, what's the process? How do you call on it?
Yeah, basically, I do what I went through very briefly before. Every time I want to go to my intuition, I always embody each of these 6 premises. For me, it's just like being a pilot on a plane. You know, a pilot doesn't just, unless you're Denzel Washington in the movie Flight, I don't know if you've seen that. That pilot will always there and go through a checklist, regardless of how experienced they are flying. Because that's what intuition does. It takes you from one level of existence to another. And every time I acknowledge my thoughts and feelings, I go into innocence, I go into sovereignty, I connect with the vision of what I would love to receive intuition about. I receive a symbol, and then I extract the gold from that symbol by making it up. And then it reveals what I love every time, and also reveals the action to take to create it. So it's a very simple method that works consistently.
Yes, beautiful. Now, you now live in the UK. From your accent, we can hear that, you know, that isn't where you started, but this is certainly your home now, and you live with your lovely wife, who I'm considering is the wonderful, you know, rosebud petal that you walk towards, and your son Atlas, and your beautiful dog Jack. So you have a son, a 15-year-old son. So what have you learned from Atlas that you've not learned from anyone else?
Fantastic question. I love it. So Atlas is great in the sense that he's quite blessed in that he grew up with 2 parents who've been trained in their intuition, you know? And so he's kind of grown up in this environment to be himself. And it's amazing to see him blossom as a result. And the thing that I've learned most about him, because of that space that he's had to grow, is that his ability to express his own unique imagination and the complete freedom to do that is just extraordinary, which is kind of evidenced in what he's created only recently. He just won the Young Walter Scott Prize, which is a UK-based writing prize based on historical fiction. And he did that by deciding from his intuition that he'd like to write a story about wolves. Because the theme was before you were born. And so he went to his intuition and went, yeah, I really love wolves. And what would be great would be to write about, from a wolf's perspective, when wolves first came in contact with man, and they started forming that relationship. And so completely lost himself through his imagination, became a wolf, wrote it from the wolf's perspective, and it was extraordinary. And just the ability to do that, like he said, I'm just going to go off and write now, and then he'll share it with us. Where did you get from?
Wow. Do you think that's the career he's gonna? Do you think he'll go into maybe script writing, or you think that's his path? Yeah.
That's definitely what he's so oriented. He's such a great way of creating stories and weaving his imagination with writing. Extraordinary. He's just entering a competition, which is the Lewis Carroll competition by the Lewis Carroll Society. And what they want you to do is to write the missing chapter that Lewis Carroll didn't write. And so you can choose what that is. And he's just come up with this chapter that honestly you would have sworn that Lewis Carroll wrote it.
Wow.
Really, I just read it last.
Wow. Look, to be in touch with his intuition, I'm not surprised, with both parents on this path as well. And I guess he just, it's the process of his, adjusting the valves as you go along, and like you say, staying aligned. And if you've been doing it from the day dot, then it's just pure source, isn't it? Just channeling all the way through. And you get a kind of a kickstart really to enjoying life and following life from that perspective. Well, it's all very I love it. The blending of the mystical experiences with I think the the neurophysiology of us as beings as well. And so how can, if people are interested to step out and join you on this journey, what are you offering at the moment? I guess you're not doing the big events, but you're still teaching and training online. Yeah, is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I run a regular webinar. Yeah, absolutely. I run a regular webinar, how to create what you love using your intuitive wisdom. The next one's coming up on the 15th of June. But I do that regularly, once a month, once a fortnight, depending on when I want to run it. And it's always on my homepage at darreneden.com as to when I'm doing it. And it's always free. And that's where I actually go through each of those 6 premises and take people through them to have an experience of their intuition, to receive a symbol in relationship to their royalty and make it up, similar to what you've experienced at the workshop. I'm amazed that you still remember the symbols.
Oh, it was so amazing. No, honestly, it blew my mind. It was like, I think everyone in the audience was just like blown away. It was definitely something you don't forget, Darren. Definitely not. So yeah, and believe me, I've done a lot of funky stuff and been out there, but that was really spectacular. So and I know your work, having had private sessions from you as well. So so thank you for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom, and thank you for sharing your time, and we'll put your details into the text of the podcast. Thank you, Darren.